I go to what some would call an academically competitive school. And when I first got here, I thought that everybody was going to be a tryhard. You got your chess prodigy here, your violin girl, Johnny Juzang, and some random nerds over there. But it wasn't like that. In fact, most people I talked to wanted to separate themselves from this image of the stereotypical perfect student. Yeah, of course, there were still a few who took academics with the utmost seriousness, but you could sense that for many at my school, they wanted to loosen up, try new things. Now, this is common college behavior, maybe the result of a repressed childhood, caving to peer pressure, the freedom of having a clean slate. But at UCLA especially, there's something more that's driving this change. There's a push not just from internal desires, but from an outer environmental pressure to survive. And there's a pull, not just from pure influence, but from an abundance of social niches yearning to be filled. In evolutionary science, there's this phenomenon known as adaptive radiation. This is when new species rapidly diverge out of a common ancestor, often in response to new ecological contexts. We'll return to UCLA in a bit, but let's first look at some birds. For context, a long time ago, a group of finches migrated from the South American coast to the Galapagos Islands. Since this first generation all came from a similar place, they all started out pretty similar. However, as the generations passed, they quickly diverged into different species for two main reasons. Firstly, it would have been bad if they had all stayed the same. If everyone had the same beak size, say they were all medium length, then all the finches would be competing for the same food. The medium beak is best tuned for eating the Scutia spicata, which is fine in the beginning, but as the population grows, the environment and its resources can only support so many birds. Yet while all this Scutia spicata is consumed, large seeds on the ground remain untouched. If some finches break off from the mainstream, becoming a new species with bigger beaks, they can better crack open these seeds. This would benefit the general finch population with less competition over the scarce resources, while especially benefiting this new group with access to previously untapped resources. In a similar way, when a new batch of freshmen arrive at UCLA, most people were the 4.0 tryhards in high school, and at first everyone thinks that they're unique, that they have the X factor, they have what it takes to be at the top. But pretty soon you realize that there's just way too much competition. For classes with a curve, only so many kids can escape with an A. There's only so many internships, only so many research opportunities. But even more than that, you feel like being the quote-unquote smart kid, the compliment that granted such a dopamine rush in high school, now in college, it's the blandest, most basic title to wrap your identity around. And while some stick it through, kudos to the pre-med kids, many people, especially those in STEM, they switch up. They go to biz econ, choose to focus on fashion, or maybe they pour time into social work, fall in love with music. Basically, they diverge. And something I'm learning is that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's quite a natural response. Going back to our Galapagos example, you see that there's not only disadvantages for staying the same, there's also strong incentives for diversifying. When the finches go to a new island, there's so much opportunity. Back at home, maybe the large seeds were never a good food option because the squirrels always got to them first. But now on the island, the finches got it all to themselves. Thus, the people that used to hold them back are no longer present, so finch species can expand out, claiming environmental niches that weren't originally theirs back on the mainland. For me, during high school, I never skated. I wasn't cool enough to skate. Like, if I had tried to skate in high school, I would have gotten called a poser by the real skaters. But now everyone who is super good at skating, no offense, but most of them probably didn't come to UCLA, let's be real. However, that opens up the space for people like me. Since the average skate talent at UCLA is pretty low, I can skate, and even if I mess up a bit, it's still socially acceptable. And not just for the niche of skating, but since UCLA is so academic heavy, almost ironically, there's so many open opportunities to explore niches outside of academics. You see people joining the a cappella club, and even if they're not so good at singing, there's not the same standard or pressure as if we went to a music school. Even some not as good examples like the 4.0 high school valedictorians turning into ABGs and Kevin Nguyen's. In conclusion, adaptive radiation is interesting, I guess, and affects not just finches but your college social life too.